Well, good afternoon and welcome to our natural living workshop with herbalist Lily Cunning. She is with her Make Do Farms and with Haven Herbs, and we are so thrilled that she is sharing her time and expertise with us to talk about natural skincare. So I am going to go ahead and mute everybody, and as I'm doing that, that'll give Lily a chance to unmute herself, and then we will I will let people in also to the group. And then we will do our screen share here. And
unmute. There we go. Can you hear me now? For some reason I was muted. So I have it down that we're doing seasonal allergies today. Is that not what you have, Darlene?
You are correct. I apologize. Yes, I was getting ahead of myself.
That's okay. I had a little bit of a panic. I'm like, oh no, did I prepare for the wrong one?
Nope. That's next month. That's in April. Okay. So I do apologize. Yes, today is seasonal allergies. I know better than to try to do two things at one time.
Well, you know, I've been wrong in the past, so I'm just like, yeah. So do you have any more announcements that you need to make for CSC?
Just that we have our Cooking for Wellness community meal on Thursday night. We do have our limited number of people registered to get a meal. And then we have our Yoga Nidra on Saturday at 11.
Fantastic. Well, excellent. So today we're going to be talking about seasonal allergies, also known as hay fever, and how to deal with them naturally rather than taking either prescription or over-the-counter drugs. Different things that you can do to eliminate or cope with the symptoms of seasonal allergies in a way that works for folks. So yeah, let's get started and turn the page or scroll or whatever. So allergies, you know, while a lot of people don't think of them as being that big of a deal, it does affect over 50 million people every year. And seasonal allergies are the 6th leading cause of chronic illness. So allergies can cascade into other things. So we want to eliminate that reaction. And the kind of allergies that we're going to be talking about today is also known as allergic rhinitis. And it affects millions of people, over 6 million kids and over 20 million adults. And additionally, you know, obviously there are food allergies and skin allergies, and we can talk about those a little bit at the end. But I kind of wanted to talk about this huge issue, especially in central Ohio, about allergic rhinitis, where, you know, your upper respiratory system is so affected by different things. Yeah, we can move on. So spring allergies or hay fever or allergic rhinitis, depending on what you want to call it, you know, we're pretty familiar. It's sneezing, it's watery eyes, it's congestion and inflammation of the sinuses. Sometimes they just get swollen and it's not even about mucus. Often there's an accompanying cough or sore throat that's caused by postnasal drip from so much mucus production. And the important thing to know, because a lot of people don't know the difference between allergies and other illnesses. They think they may have a cold or they may worry about COVID, and we're going to talk about that as well. But your mucus is going to be clear or white when you have an allergic reaction. If it's yellow or green or some combination of those colors, then we're talking about an infection. But usually when folks this time of year especially are constantly sneezing and blowing their noses and they have a sore throat when they wake up in the morning especially, and their mucus is clear or white, we're talking about hay fever. And it can cause symptoms that feel like a cold. But the cause of your spring allergies is an overactive immune system. All of the things that are happening in your body that are uncomfortable, that we think of as the symptoms of a problem, are actually your immune system responses. So mucus and congestion and sinus pressure. All of that is your body thinking whatever it is that it's reacting to, whether that's pollen or spores or mildew. It's thinking that those particles that are getting into your upper respiratory system are pathogens. And so they're creating mucus to trap them so that you can blow your nose and expel them before they take over parts of your body and cause you greater illness. And because of that mucus constantly draining down the throat, we swallow all the time, and we don't even realize we're doing that. It causes a sore throat, especially when you wake up first thing in the morning, because you're not realizing you're not up and gravity's not helping you. So your body is really pushing to get all of that excessive mucus down into your digestive system so it can just expel it. It also can cause like sinus headaches and pressure behind the eyes. And that may be mucus or it may be inflammation of the sinus passages. And inflammation is also an immune system response. Your body swells tissues and fills it with fluids that are full of fighter cells, so that it can counteract any pathogens that it encounters. And so all of these things, even though they're uncomfortable, are your body trying to deal with a potential problem. Now, obviously, pollen is not really truly a problem. And so these symptoms are irritating and they can cause a derailment of normal life. I know when I get my seasonal allergies, my eyes won't stop watering. Ugh. And I'm dealing with lots of sinus pressure and I have to clear that out. And sometimes I get a headache, and I hate headaches. They're the worst. So, I want to get rid of my allergies as quickly as possible. So there's a number of approaches that you can use to actually eliminate allergies or reduce their symptoms. But first, let's talk about whether you're actually experiencing allergies or something else. So I talked about the mucus color, right? That is a huge component of knowing whether you're sick or not. But there are other symptoms that you can look at. So if you have a cold, you're going to have nasty looking mucus. It's going to be green or yellow. It's going to be really thick. And you also would have other symptoms. If you have the flu or some other virus like COVID, you would have lots of body aches and pain. You also can get a fever with any of those. And a fever, again, is an inflammation response, or it's a immune response. Fever is when your body starts baking all of those pathogens and trying to raise your body temperature to one where those pathogens won't survive, but you will. We've been taught by pharmaceutical companies that as soon as you get a fever, you want to bring it down, but that's not true. Your body has these amazing abilities to fight pathogens. And the only reason you would want to reduce a fever is if it's over 102 for more than 3 days. So while it's uncomfortable, your body is fighting something and you want to let yourself have a fever. In fact, most cultures, they swaddle themselves and make it even more hot and sweat and get all of that, like try and get as hot as possible so that those pathogens die sooner. So fever is a symptom of an illness where your body is just like, okay, everything's widespread. We need to kill these things off as quickly as possible. So it raises your body temperature to one that's uncomfortable but not deadly. We definitely want to take a fever down if it's lasted more than 3 days or if it's over 102 for that period of time, because then we're talking about possibly damaging yourself. But usually your body is really good at bringing it back down after that period of time. Before I move on, are there any questions about determining whether you have seasonal allergies or some other kind of illness?
People are welcome to unmute themselves or use the chat.
Yeah. And if you could read to me, because I can't see anything but the slideshow. No?
No questions, it looks like.
All right, let's move on. Everybody's been studying, I'm sure. I know I've been always listening for the latest news, particularly about COVID and what they know about it and how it operates. And, will the vaccines work against the new mutations and like all the things. Like, I definitely have been trying to stay in the loop that way. So hay fever in and of itself is uncomfortable, but there can be complications. 80% of people with asthma suffer from seasonal allergies, and it can cause asthma attacks. And that, of course, can be fatal. So, we want to make sure that we keep allergy symptoms at bay so that we don't trigger an asthma attack. You also want to find out what exactly you're allergic to. A lot of people who know that they get hay fever every year at certain times of the year still don't have any idea whether it's trees or grasses or something else. And being able to track your symptoms, I highly recommend, if you're not aware, keeping a journal of when and then comparing it to pollen counts that we know are high on a given time. And actually, one of the handouts that Darlene is going to send everybody actually tracks different types of pollen to the different times of year, so that you can take a really good guess of whether it's grasses, which is really common, or trees. I definitely have tree allergies. Cottonwood is my bane. You see those little fluffs floating in the air and my eyes are watering and I'm sneezing, and there have been some pretty epic cottonwood years since I've moved to Ohio, I'll tell you. I had one where I had to clean my air conditioning unit outside like 3 or 4 times with hoses because the cottonwood would just like stick to it, and I'd have to get it all off. Ugh, the worst. The other thing that happens with allergy suffering is that it can often interfere with a good night's sleep. Excuse me. If you're constantly sneezing or you're congested and you can't breathe when you're laying down, you can easily lose a good night's sleep. And of course, that's not good for your health either. We definitely want to get good sleep for all health issues. And the other complications for hay fever, and it's not hay fever itself, but it's how most people treat it, is if you go to over-the-counter drugs, which, you think, oh yeah, they're safe, everybody takes them. A lot of them are steroidal, and that's not really recommended for long-term use. I have seen people that they come to me and they're like, oh, my allergies are so bad this year and nothing that I've done before is working for me. And I'm like, well, what have you done before? And they say, oh, I take Flonase every day. And I'm like, well, that's a steroid, right? And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, it's a corticosteroid. And it's, corticosteroids are recommended for short-term use, but not long-term use. But, you don't see the commercials saying that, right? You see safe for every day, that sort of thing. And especially people with immune compromised systems, including those who are surviving cancer, you don't want to use steroids long-term. It definitely has adverse impact. So NasaCort, Flonase, those are some corticosteroids that you really want to avoid. The other thing is that sometimes the over-the-counter pills that you can take, they have some side effects that people don't like. Sometimes people get really brain foggy or loopy from taking different nasal decongestants, or they dry them out so much they get nosebleeds. These are undesirable things when you're just trying to, get through your day and not have the pollen get you. So there's complications, and we'll talk about all of those things and how to avoid them. So there's a lot of causes for allergic rhinitis, and not all of them are allergies per se. So pollen and dust, dust mites, and mold and mildew and spores, those are all allergic reactions, right? Like your body is freaking out thinking that those little things that you see under the electron microscope there are pathogens, and they're not. They look very similar. Like if you look at the pollen pieces, they look like coronavirus, kind of. So, you can't blame your body for freaking out. But also what can cause allergic rhinitis symptoms is pollution and particulates in the air. And when you live in a state that doesn't regulate air pollution very well, like Ohio, you're looking at number one cause of air pollution are different factories. We've got all kinds of plastics plants and chemical plants in Ohio or around the border, especially like in southeastern Ohio, where I first moved. Before I moved to Columbus, it was terrible. We had the Dow plant right across the river, and we had several plastics plants in Belpre, and the air quality was terrible. And in central Ohio, we've got this really interesting convergence. We're kind of in a basin. And so what happens is the cloud cover comes in and it just sort of keeps everything close to the ground compared to dissipating into the atmosphere. And so we have more respiratory issues here than in other places, because we're just exposed to more. The other thing that you could be allergic to, particularly indoor kind of allergies, in addition to dust mites, is animal dander. You know, my partner is allergic to cat dander. We just got a kitty. But the nice thing is that if you, right, Darlene's laughing. If you get a kitty, like a baby, you can actually condition yourself over prolonged exposure to not see that as a pathogen. You can train your immune system. And that's one of the strategies we're going to talk about, is retraining your immune system to be nicer to you. So let's move on. All right, so there are 4 strategies we're going to go over in order to, you know, naturally work with your seasonal allergies. One is retraining your immune system, and I gave you an example of if you're allergic to cats and you want a kitty, how to do it. Get as small of a kitty as you can, and you're going to work on prolonging the exposure over time. And I have to say, it's working out pretty well. Kitty sleeps with us, and we don't have allergic responses. We did like the first couple days, and we had Obi take a bunch of herbs that are antihistamine herbs. Obi's my partner. But we're not doing that anymore, and Kitty's still sleeping with us. And so it's worked out really well. The other strategies are different kinds of cleansing, both yourself and your environment, symptom management, which of course we need to do starting at the beginning so that we can get through these long-term strategies, and then also reducing your exposure to different allergens. So, retraining your immune system. So I mentioned the kitty one. There's other, if you're allergic to different kinds of pollens, what you might want to do is think about ingesting bee products that are local. So honey and pollen that you get from local beekeepers, and ingesting them. If you introduce those allergens through your digestive tract, your immune system, 75% of it at least, is in your gut. You're going to be introducing those allergens in a different way, and you're going to reduce your body's immune response to those kinds of pollens over time. It's a very effective strategy. And I highly recommend either raw local honey, make sure it's not cooked, because then you're denaturing those proteins and your body doesn't react the same way. So raw and local within 30 miles of your area, when I mean local. Or pollen. You can often get pollen from beekeepers as well, and you can put it on your breakfast cereal. You can put it in a smoothie. It actually tastes kind of interesting. It's kind of nutty and sweet at the same time, a little crunchy. So that's one way of doing it if you're allergic to pollens. Another is low dose exposure, which is the kitty method, right? So we introduce small amounts of allergens. So going out in the mornings before major pollen spray, so there's just a few in the air, and limiting your exposure. Light therapy is another thing that they're studying quite extensively. Being exposed to full spectrum lighting, if it's safe for you, can reduce your body's response. When we stay, the thinking is when we stay all penned up, which is one of the typical things for reducing your exposure, is staying in the house with the AC on and your HVAC. But they're thinking that light therapy has had some amazing statistical increases in reducing those symptoms. Acupuncture is also really effective at retraining your immune system to not hyper respond to pollens and spores and things like that. And the last thing that's on this list are immunomodulators. And we're going to talk about that class of herbs. But what they do is they retrain your immune system. They don't suppress your immune system like the kind of drugs that you take when you have an autoimmune disease. And they don't boost your immune system the way that some herbs do, like when you're trying to get rid of the flu and you want to boost your immune system and increase its functioning. But what immunomodulators do, they're a very special class, is they help your immune system make better choices. They kind of help your immune system find a golden mean. So if you've got a hyperactive immune system, which if you have allergies and they're pretty pronounced, you do, it helps modulate those responses. Yeah.
Lily, we have a comment in the chat box that says, I first heard of the pollen and royal jelly with President Ronald Reagan.
Okay. I only thought he liked jelly beans, not other kinds of sweets.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'd heard about the raw local honey, so that's pretty much all I purchased, but I never really knew, is it something that you suggest pretty much daily?
You know, it depends on how bad your symptoms are. You know, if you're ingesting it regularly, especially over the season in which you experience the allergies, you're going to train your immune system faster. So yeah, like if you've got a pretty pronounced allergic response and you want to get over it sooner, and you know that it's to pollens and not something else, taking it more regularly rather than big doses, taking small doses throughout the day is a really good way to deal with it. So cleansing, you know, I've got this picture here and a lot of people freak out over neti, but neti is an amazing way if you suffer from upper respiratory anything, whether it's allergies or sinusitis, or if you're prone to sinus infections. Neti is amazing. And I put it off in my personal life for a long time because I thought I'm never going to be able to do that. I have a really pronounced gag reflex and I think it's gross and but I'll tell you what, I neti almost every day this time of year. And it feels amazing afterwards. Even if I don't feel like I have a ton of stuff up there, once I cleanse it out, my head feels, I don't know, like more hollow. Like I can feel that things have been removed and I'm less responsive to allergens. And it removes any, you know, pollens and things that are up there that your body is responding to. It just gets them all out. Now, the thing that I will say about neti is that you not only do it with water, but you put minerals in your water. I use a combination of sea salt and baking soda. And between those two things, it's going to kill any potential pathogens that are in your water, amoebas or, you know, cryptosporidium or any of those things. Because depending on where you live, your water supply may have little critters living in it. And you certainly don't want to give them occupancy in your head. So you want to use, you know, salt, neti salt. And the other thing is that you want to make sure that you're using warm water. Cold water is a shock to the system. I'll tell you that. I didn't think about it the first couple times that I was netting, and it was like, it hurt. It was like the worst brain freeze you can imagine. So use warm water when you're using a neti pot because it's very gentle. It will, and warm, you know, chemically speaking, if it's more of a solvent. So if you've got thick mucus up there, the warm water will help to start diluting it so that you can flush it out. So neti and related strategies, they, in the United States, they sell more than just neti pots. They have like weird squeezy bottles. And I saw some infomercial, some doctor was like, I invented this nasal cleansing method. And I'm like, no, you didn't. But he invented the machine, the plastic machine that has sort of a pump that does it. Personally, I have a ceramic pot. It lives in my bathroom. And it's just, you know, right there, and you don't need special equipment. And frankly, I would rather not have like a plastic machine that has breakable parts. I'd rather just have a ceramic pot. And those pots are specially designed, they're angled so that if you tilt your head, it's going to go up and down through your nasal passages just fine. The one thing that I would say is if you're really congested and you've never done neti before, it might be weird because you might go ahead and do it and tilt your head the way that they tell you to and nothing is coming out. And that's because you're really congested. And so keep trying and blow your nose a bunch and keep trying. And eventually you'll get a trickle, and then you'll get, you know, a little creek, and then you'll get a river. And once you get the river, just keep doing it because it's cleansing the whole thing and you're keeping all that gunk that you don't want in your head out of your head.
Lily,
The
we
other
have,
way-
we
oh,
have
go ahead.
questions in the chat.
Sure.
The first one is what proportions of salt and baking soda?
Sure, I do a half and half. I make it really simple. And I keep like a little jar, like I have an old jam jar that I use, and I just fill it halfway with sea salt and halfway with baking soda, and I just mix it together. And I have like a little tiny spoon, I think it's like a quarter teaspoon or something in a jar, and I just put that much in my whole pot. Yeah.
And then do you need to use boiled, cooled down, or quote unquote clean water?
You know, I can't speak to other people's water supplies. Like if you've got, you know, municipal water, city water, where it's got fluoride in it and it's got chlorine in it, you might want to use something else like distilled water, where you've boiled off some of the things. I have spring water, so I worry more about pathogens than I do about chemicals. So it just depends on where you live. Obviously, you want to use as clean a water as you can. So if you are suspect of your water, maybe you don't drink it, don't put it up your nose either.
Yeah, because that somebody had asked about distilled, so you answered that.
Yeah.
And then we had one comment that said, I worked with an ENT doctor who used neti daily and said to do it. I have used the spray bottle form and it takes the top of my head off for a few seconds. The squeeze bottle is what I have.
This is our kitty. She came up.
Oh, how
Her
cute.
name is Nix. There she goes in her basket, except for
And
her
then somebody else said, I use my filtered Berkeley filtered water in my Neti Med sinus rinse bottle with the pre-measured packet.
Yeah. Berkey is a really great water filtration system. I have a Berkey as well. I don't use it now that I'm out on the farm because we have really wonderful spring water. But yeah, when I was in the city, I did Berkey for sure. And the nice thing is that, you know, the filters last like 6 months or something. So you're really, once you buy the system, it's really easy to just, you know, get buying more filters. Other things that you can do for cleansing is, you know, showering after any potential exposure. So if you go out in the garden, take a shower afterwards. You probably would anyway, because you're probably dirty, but you know, take a shower, get all those pollens off of you. Or if you're just going about your day and you're not doing anything particular outside, shower at the end of the day rather than at the beginning, because then before you go to bed and like wallow in your bed and spread the pollens around and lead to possible insomnia, you've cleaned yourself off and any potential allergens that you've had are gone. So that's nice. Also cleansing your home. So, you know, making sure that you change the air filter in your HVAC system regularly. I think ours is once a month. So we do that. And I'm actually always surprised when I take that filter out, how gross it is. You know, so we've got that. Also vacuuming your house, getting up any dust mites and hair and dander from your animals. And of course, pollens get into your house too, if that's what you're allergic to. And changing, if you have a filter in your vacuum, changing that regularly is super important. So you're getting rid of potential flare-ups. Those are my chickens. They're so our brooders are in our downstairs bathroom, so you can hear them. They're probably hungry. I'm gonna feed them after this, but yeah, they're getting so big they need to go outside. We're building the coop this weekend, so. All right, so symptom management. This is a strategy that, you know, every herbalist works on symptom management as well as addressing the root causes. So immunomodulation is getting to the root cause. Eliminating the exposure is getting to the root cause. Symptom management is something that makes people more comfortable while you're dealing with the root cause. So it's also important because these things are the things that bother us. Steroids, I did talk about a lot of the allergy medicine out there are steroids. And if you're having a huge acute response, like let's say you have asthma or whatever, and you're having a flare up, yeah, short-term use of steroids can save your life, right? But they are not for long-term use. They can cause serious endocrine problems, and people who already have immune issues like surviving cancer or autoimmune should never be taking steroids for very long. It can cause some serious long-term problems. There are also side effects of over-the-counter decongestants. I know some people feel like their head is a balloon and it's kind of floating above their body and they just feel super weird when they take them. Or they just can't keep a thought in their head. And so they can't really function during the day if they have to go to work or whatever, taking those things like Sudafed and all of that. And then some over-the-counter drugs just simply do not work. Like there is an over-the-counter allergy medicine that took 20 years to get out onto the market. And the reason it took that long is because they could not prove its efficacy. And it was only after some strings were pulled that the FDA was like, okay, but there's a clock that runs out on a patent. And so, I think it's 30 years. So they only had 10 years of having this exclusive patent. And then they had to move it to an over-the-counter drug, and they keep reformulating it to market it differently or whatever. But, it's kind of ridiculous that drugs that can't prove their efficacy are even approved in the first place. But there we have it. But the other thing that you can do for symptom management is you can get different classes of herbs that are going to help you with different kinds of symptom management. And we're going to talk about the different herbal actions that can help you with symptom management when we're talking about herbs and herbal allies. Any other questions so far?
We just had
No.
we just had a question about the price of the neti pots and the cost of a Berkeley filtered water, but Heidi did, she put a link in the chat for the Netimed kits. And so you mentioned having a Berkeley filtered water system. Do you remember in a price range?
I think it was for the small one, which was called the Travel Berkey, which is one we have. We only have 3 people in our family. We would refill it every day. But I think it was like $100 for the system. And then the filters last for like 6 months or so. And I think those are also a couple $100. But it ends up being less than if you did the Brita filter because you constantly have to change those every month. With the neti pot, rather than like a more modern system, I think they're like $15 or $16 for a plastic or a ceramic pot. So it's not very expensive at all to do that. And you reuse it over and over again. Like I've had my neti pot for, I don't know, 6 years and it hasn't broken. So, it's all good. So yeah, all about, not only doing things that help in the long run, but also are affordable, right? Because we all know that the cost of medication is just going up and up and up and up and up. So reducing exposure is another strategy that you can do to eliminate allergic reactions. So we talked about filtration. Also, obviously during COVID times, we're all wearing masks outside, but if you're just, in your yard and you're by yourself and you have to mow the lawn, wear a mask if you have a grass allergy, right? That's going to reduce the amount of exposure you get to that allergen. So thinking about that and thinking about blocking, your eyes too. They make wraparound glasses that you can wear so that you're not getting potential allergens near your eyes to cause eye watering. You also want to stay inside during your high pollen times. And again, I have a handout to show you what time of day that is. It's usually late morning to the afternoon is the high time. And if you think about it, that makes sense, right? Like it's warm now, all the plants are like, okay, it's time to reproduce, and they're going to send it out as soon as, you know, it gets warm enough, because mornings are colder, evenings are colder. So it's going to be in that middle time when they are sending out, you know, their pollen to reproduce. Also during fires, you know, when I lived in California during the wildfires, we stayed indoors and we blocked access to our windows. We didn't open our windows. We had HVAC on with filtration. And the other thing that we did was we would attach furnace filters to a box fan. We would duct tape it on, and we would, you know, have the air go through the filter, and we were filtering the air inside our house doing that. And you'd be surprised, like, it doesn't look smoky in your house, but it caught a lot of stuff. So that is super helpful. Also, you can, if you need to be outside and you need to be outside during a time where there are higher allergens, you can actually put a very thin layer of salve, not lotion, but salve, which is like lipids mixed with wax, on the inside of your nostrils. It's going to feel weird at first, but you'll get used to it. But what that does is it catches particulates so that they don't go further up and cause those allergic symptoms. And actually, one of the herbs that I has an antihistamine response, I make a salve out of for poison ivy. So I use that one and I put that in there because it's got antihistamine action, and it's going to catch, just because of the type of remedy that it is, it's going to catch particulates. It's yeah, so that's the one that I personally use.
We have a question. What type of salve or ointment?
I would use one that doesn't have a ton of essential oils in it, because, you know, it's right there at the nose, and so you'll have a lot more exposure to it than you would if you were applying it to your skin. But like I said, I use the one that I do for poison ivy, which contains jewelweed, and we'll talk about jewelweed. You can also make one from stinging nettle, which also has some really great antihistamine and anti-inflammatory response. Yeah, so there's, you know, if you're making a salve, I would use beeswax, which has been filtered but not cooked, from a local beekeeper. Like, we get our wax from Honey Run Farm, which is local, and we also get our honey from them. So we use that for our salves, and, you know, I infuse botanicals into my oils, and then I harden it with the salve. So you're getting a lot of allergy response in one little product, you know, between the wax and the
I
herbs.
apologize. If somebody was wanting to look for a commercial type to buy, what would you recommend?
Sure. Well, Haven makes some. So I am a worker owner of Haven Herbs. The one that is jewelweed is called a jewel of a salve. And so you can use it for poison ivy too. When you're out in the garden, you can apply it to poison ivy, and obviously it helps treat poison ivy, but also I put it above my glove line, you know, where my sleeves and my gloves meet, because then it can prevent poison ivy exposure as well. So it's a good multi-purpose thing. Okay, so different kinds of herbs. So in herbalism, when I'm teaching my students about herbalism in their foundational class, the first thing I have them do is study what we call herbal actions. And these are ways that plants affect human physiology. They have an action in that system, right? And so an antihistamine blocks the histamine response of the immune system. An anticatarrhal is something that stops coughing. Bitters are a tonic that are throughout our digestive tract and also in our brain and lungs. And when we consume bitters, whether that's bitter food or a bitter supplement, like an herbal supplement, it stimulates proper functioning. And so the bitter receptors in the lungs can help asthmatics, for example, breathe better. The bitter receptors in the gut help with immune response, digestive response, and endocrine response, because the digestive system is completely interwoven with both the endocrine and immune systems. So all of that is there. Anti-inflammatories, we know they stop the inflammation response. Decongestants are things that drain, congestion, and expectorants help us get out, things out of our lungs, for example. Immunomodulators, I talked about a little bit earlier, and that is when we train the immune system to make better choices. And adaptogens are a class of herbs that are super safe for anyone. And they help tonify both immune and endocrine responses. So it's pretty neat to use adaptogens. I use adaptogens to help me with my adrenal response, because I'm an anxious person and I get stressed out, especially these days over, what's it called? COVID, right? The pandemic. You worry about those things. So there are different herbs that you can use that are these types of herbs. So for antihistamines, looking for ingredients like stinging nettle or butterbur or eyebright or turmeric or jewelweed or garlic. All of those things help the histamine response and lessen it over time. For immune functioning, a lot of people know about echinacea, and that's a really good one. And that's actually a native wildflower here in Ohio. Reishi mushroom is one that I think is fantastic. And anything that is rich in vitamin C. Now, personally, I prefer to get my vitamins from food sources, because the supplements, if they're synthetically derived, your body may or may not make use of them. So some vitamin C rich foods are bell peppers, broccoli, cantaloupe, cauliflower, citrus fruit, kiwi, strawberries, tomatoes, and all of the winter squashes. My favorite is delicata. I love delicata squash. It's so yummy. And then there are things that can help you eliminate some of those symptoms. So like mullein, for example, mullein leaf helps. It's a bronchial strengthener, and it helps you expel mucus from the lungs. Yellow dock is going to help you eliminate anything that is inside the body. So it helps you, it's not specifically a laxative, but it is a liver cleanser. Cordyceps is a fungus, a mushroom, that is really great to help you eliminate toxins from the body. And horehound helps you in your upper respiratory expel things. So those herbs are fantastic. And then bitters, like I said, digestive bitters is a really great formula to use that will help modulate your immune and endocrine responses and help you eliminate anything, because most bitters are also liver cleansers. So all of these types of herbs are super helpful when you're dealing with symptom management and getting to the base of the issue.
Lily, we have a question. What are the over-the-counter bitters?
All bitters are over the counter because it's an herbal remedy. So, in my bitters formula, so it's a two-part formula. There's digestive and bitters. The bitter part of the formula, I put in yellow dock, burdock, and dandelion root. So those three are nice bitter plants. You can obviously make your own bitters if you dig up your dandelions and they haven't been sprayed with nasty stuff, and you can extract them. But yeah, and then I have the digestive part, which is all what we call carminative herbs, things that help with gas and bloating and sour stomach and nausea. Mm-hmm.
Well, that was the last of your slides.
Okay, well then we've got 15 minutes for question and answer.
Lily, do you ever use violet leaves?
I have, not necessarily for allergies, but yeah, I do use violet, and I make sure I get out there every spring because they're so ephemeral, the violet blossoms, and then you take the leaves at the time of the flowering. I haven't for allergies though.
What are they good for?
I use it for skincare and respiratory support, but not necessarily allergy respiratory stuff.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And they make your extraction look really pretty. If you get the blossoms, they're really pretty.
My question about the bitters is I bought some at Wyland's. You know, now those are like the flavored ones that you could put in your coffee or whatever. Would that have any effect?
It'll have a mild effect. So bitters that are made for like flavor,
Yeah.
like for cocktails or whatnot, they are less therapeutic because they don't put as much bitter in there as they do flavor. When I taught a class on bitter making, because I used to, teach classes in person back in the day when we could do that, I would make both cocktail and therapeutic bitters. And so the cocktail bitters you see in the process, like you start with maybe one bittering agent, and then most of the layering is for flavor. So like I have some of those in my house, like I have chocolate chili bitters, and I have orange cardamom bitters, and they're delicious, and I drink those. But if I want therapeutic stuff, I'm going to want something that has highly concentrated bittering agents, which, the cocktail bitters have less of. But it definitely doesn't hurt, and it's a pleasant way to get a little bit of therapy. Cocktail
If you're
therapy.
not domestic like me and you won't be making your own, it's better than nothing.
It's better than nothing, but it's even
Okay.
better to buy therapeutic bitters so that you're getting like concentrated bittering agents. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Lily, this is Heidi. I just wanted to say thanks for letting me know that Flonase is not a good long-term use product. I had no idea. I've been using it for years.
Sure.
So I will be weaning myself off of that starting tonight. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. And, you can always start the weaning process once you have something else in place. I make a couple very specific allergy formulas for Haven. One is a tea form, one is a tincture form. And those are safe to take long term, and they're safe for children, and they're safe for people that are immune compromised. And I started doing those before I weaned myself off. And that way there's no like period of suffering.
Yeah.
But yeah, long-term steroid use, I really wish that the medical community talked about it a little bit more when they made recommendations.
And I have it on my list of medications when I go to my oncologist, and they never said anything about it. So yeah, it's kind of surprising. Well,
Yeah.
and I'm supposed to have surgery next week, and I'm not supposed to take anything, no supplements, no nothing for the next few days.
Okay.
So
Well, good luck.
yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Lily, I also had a doctor say you can take the over-the-counter allergy meds to counteract dark circles under our eyes, that's probably caused by allergies. But there again, like you said, you don't want to take it every day, I guess.
Well,
I think you know more than some of the doctors do about those meds.
Yeah, it's funny. When I get clients and we do consultations, I have them give me a list of all their medications and their supplements, and I go through and I look at the references about those drugs and what their on-label use is, what their off-label use is, what their side effects are, what their contraindications are with other supplements and drugs. And often I find it's really bewildering to me because people are on like 3 drugs for the same issue, and that's way over medicated, right? Or they're on things that like don't work well with each other or cause side effects. And people are experiencing those side effects, but yet they're not taking off certain drugs. It's really bewildering to me. And I don't think it's necessarily the doctor's fault. I think that what ends up happening is, number one, people only have so much time in medical school that they learn about chemical pathways, just like they only have so much time that they learn about nutrition. And then after they graduate, they're working on paying off their student loans and getting their residency done and all of that stuff. And there's not a lot of time to do continuing education. And it's usually people that dedicate themselves to more of a holistic practice that end up doing all this research, and realizing that we haven't been given the full picture, and that the studies are out there. Like, you could get studies, print them out and hand them to your doctor, and it would be news to them. There's just not enough time to do all of that additional education. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's so hard. There's way too much to know. So, and it's hard being responsible for someone else's health and overseeing their case. And you can only spend, 5 to 10 minutes with them,
Right.
in an office visit, because the insurance won't let you bill for anything other than that. It's hard. I get it. It's not easy being a doctor.
No.
Yeah.
And you can impart a lot of knowledge to them and to us. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Absolutely. And one thing I like to say is, Darlene can give you my email address when she sends you the handouts and the slideshow for today. If you all have any questions that you think of after the fact, just email me. I'm happy to answer them. Yeah.
Lily, we did have another question in the chat. It's like, could you please explain a little bit more about adaptogens? Thank you.
Sure. So the Western world kind of found out about adaptogens back in the 80s. Does anyone remember during the Olympics, everyone thought the Soviets were doing all kinds of performance enhancing drugs, and like drug testing became a really big deal during the Olympics? And it turns out they weren't. What they were doing was taking Eleuthero, which back then was called Siberian ginseng, and it's an adaptogen, and it definitely enhanced their performance. Their bodies were able to take in more oxygen. Their muscles were able to build faster. And so they had this amazing advantage, but none of it was illegal, right? It was just a root of a plant. And so the Chinese have been using adaptogens. They don't call them that. They call them supreme herbs for generations, thousands of years. But the thing that defines adaptogens is that they are safe for everyone. They work both on the adrenals and some other system. And they work to restore a healthy homeostasis. So if there are imbalances in your body, those adaptogens will help to modulate the response to come up with a good golden mean. And every adaptogen is a little different. I have a book of every known adaptogen, and it profiles them and like what they do in the body that we know. So for example, I mentioned reishi mushroom. Reishi mushroom is a fantastic immunomodulator. It also is really great in vitality and aging. They call it the mushroom of immortality in Chinese medicine. They also use it, it's an anti-tumor mushroom, and so it's really great for people that are recovering from chemotherapy and radiation. Tulsi, which is an Ayurvedic adaptogen, because these grow all over the world. Different areas have different adaptogens. Tulsi is also known as holy basil, and it's delicious as a tea. Like, I grow it and I drink it all the time. It not only works on the adrenals, but it also helps to stabilize blood sugar. So if you're having blood sugar instability, that's a really lovely one to take. And you can drink it as a tea, and it doesn't even need sweetening. It's just really tasty and lovely, and helps you regulate your blood sugar. So each of them work a little differently on different systems, but they all have in common that they help to bring the body to a healthy homeostasis, and they deal with cortisol response, so fortifying the adrenals particularly.
Okay. And then another question is, can you explain the Berkey system? I have not heard of it.
Yes, I can explain what I know of it, but definitely their website, Berkey.com, I think, or BerkeyFiltration.com, is good. So it's basically a passive system where you pour water in the top and it goes through a filter and gets to the bottom where the spigot is. And there are a couple different kinds of filters that you can get. The main one is these big charcoal cylinders that the water passes through, but then also they pass through a small orifice, and you can attach an additional filter on there for any heavy metals. So it gets pathogens, it gets metals, it gets chlorine, it gets fluoride, it takes everything out. And what's left is very clean drinking water. I think it's like 99.99% pure, and they guarantee it. And they have all the studies and things on their website, like you can download them and read it. And it's nice because it doesn't require any kind of electricity like a reverse osmosis system does underneath your sink. It's less expensive than getting like a Brita or one of those pure, you know, with a little pitcher, and you don't have to replace it as often, so you're not contributing to like toxic waste. I just find it to be a really economical and good system to use for water filtration.
Thank you. And thank you,
You know
Heidi.
what's funny? Sounds like what my mother used to do to distill water for her iron. I've got the little plastic thing in the basement, and she would pour water in there so she could put it in the irons to do the ironing, so it wouldn't ruin the iron.
Yeah. There are salts that you can use to kind of eliminate iron and other intense minerals. We have a very mineral rich water here at the farm. And if I were to put that in like a CPAP machine, or we don't use the salts, it's going to create this like limey, scaly buildup. But we use conditioning salts, including one for iron, so you know things don't rust.
Well, thank you, Heidi, for putting the link in for the berkeyfilters.com in the chat, so everybody can check the chat for that link. And we have a question: is diet tonic water helpful?
Tonic water. Okay, so the word tonic has a rich history. The kind of tonic water that you get at the store for like gin and tonic is not the same as what tonic used to mean. So tonic generally means to strengthen. And so in herbalism, we talk about tonic strengthening systems like the digestive bitters. Tonic water used to be made with cinchona bark, which extracted quinine as a constituent that people would drink. And the gin and tonics are medicinal if you're using the old kind of tonic water. It used to help with malaria, right? So when the British Empire was colonizing and taking over other countries where they were exposed to a lot of mosquitoes that carried malaria, they would drink their gin and tonics. These days, things like tonic water are not made using natural materials like cinchona bark. The quinine is added as an extract, and I'm not sure of the sourcing of where that comes from. It would be handy for malaria, but not necessarily for allergies, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It's a good alternative to drinking diet pop, which is not good for you. I love to drink diet tonic water and just add some lemon or lime. You don't have to put the gin in it. It's real refreshing, or just even drink it plain and cold. It just,
yeah, I like bubbly water too. I drink just like seltzer water, you know. That's really yummy, and you can put the bitters in that too. I do that in the summer sometimes for a refreshing drink. Yeah.
I know I used to hear that you shouldn't drink too much of the tonic water because of the quinine and effects it could have on your heart, but I don't know how much you would have to consume.
It would probably be a heck of a lot. You know? Yeah.
Well, if anybody does have any other additional questions, as Lily mentioned, I will be sending out the handouts that she sent me, and her contact information, her email will be part of that. So I do want to say thank you, Lily, so very much for, again, spending your time and your expertise and your knowledge with us. It is greatly appreciated.
Oh, you're most welcome. Thank you.